The SEAL training room erupted with laughter as Senior Chief Blackburn mocked her small frame and hesitant demeanor. "This is why standards matter," he announced, circling her like prey. When he lunged with the training knife, expecting an easy demonstration, she moved with impossible speed. One fluid motion stripped the weapon from his grip and locked his arm in a submission hold. The laughter died instantly. Stunned silence filled the room as recognition dawned in his eyes. The woman they had dismissed for weeks, the one they called weak and unfit, had just revealed skills that no recruit should possess. The question in everyone's mind: who was she really? From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of hidden strength and unexpected heroes move you, please consider subscribing to help us share more powerful moments that often go untold. Pre-dawn darkness, shrouded Naval Special Warfare Training Center, Coronado. Frigid Pacific waves crashed against the shoreline, where silhouettes of SEAL candidates endured surf torture, their bodies prone in the freezing ocean water, while instructors paced the beach shouting through megaphones. The brutal evolution was designed to push human endurance to its breaking point, separating those with true commitment from those who merely thought they were tough. Among the shivering candidates lay Ensign Briar Winters, noticeably smaller than the others. While most candidates were broad-shouldered men with obvious muscle mass, Briar was lean and compact. Her face showed signs of extreme discomfort as the minutes in the freezing water stretched on. But observant eyes might have noted the disconnection between her pained expression and her remarkably steady breathing. "5 more minutes," barked an instructor, drawing groans from the exhausted candidates. The class had started with 140 hopefuls just 2 weeks ago. They were down to 89 already, the drops coming steadily as the physical and psychological pressure mounted. This particular class was notable for including 4 women, part of the recent integration of females into special operations training that remained controversial among the old guard. When the evolution finally ended, candidates staggered to their feet, their blue-tinged lips and violent shivering evidence of the toll the exercise had taken. As they formed up on the beach, Senior Chief Riker Blackburn approached, his weathered face set in perpetual disapproval. He moved directly to where Briar stood in formation. "Winters!" he shouted, though he stood just a feet from her. "Your form is garbage. You're wasting everyone's time here." "Yes, Senior Chief," Briar responded with regulation precision, her voice neither defiant nor defeated, simply acknowledging. Blackburn's eyes narrowed slightly as though her lack of visible reaction irritated him more than insubordination would have. Other instructors exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen Blackburn's pattern before, with candidates he deemed unworthy, particularly the women who had recently been permitted into the program. 10 burpees for that pathetic performance, he ordered, before moving on to critique other candidates. Without hesitation, Briar dropped and executed the punishment exercises, her form technically perfect despite her apparent exhaustion. Later in the barracks, as candidates prepared their gear for the next evolution, candidate Zane Coleman approached Briar's bunk. Unlike most who gave her a wide berth, either from discomfort with a female candidate or fear of association with someone clearly targeted by the instructors, Zane had maintained a professional camaraderie with her. "You should eat something," he said quietly, offering her a protein bar. "You skipped breakfast to fix your gear." Briar glanced up from the equipment she was meticulously arranging. A careful observer might have noted her gear was organized with a precision that exceeded training standards. "Thanks," she said, accepting the bar. Her movements were economical, conserving energy even in this small interaction. "Why do you let him target you like that?" Zane asked, keeping his voice low. "You're outperforming half the class on the objective metrics." Briar took a measured bite before responding. "I'm just here to qualify, same as everyone." "It's not the same for everyone, though, is it?" Zane pressed. "Blackburn's had it out for you since day one." She met his eyes directly, a subtle habit that differentiated her from most struggling candidates who tended to avoid eye contact when discussing their difficulties. "Everyone faces obstacles. These are just mine." The conversation ended as another instructor entered the barracks, calling them to the next evolution. The afternoon found them in a classroom session on tactical operations. Despite the physical demands of the morning, candidates were expected to remain alert and engaged for hours of technical instruction. Senior Chief Blackburn paced at the front of the room, periodically firing questions at candidates who showed signs of fatigue. "Winters," he called out, though she sat attentively with no visible signs of inattention. Explain the difference between a linear and nonlinear ambush. The question was significantly more advanced than the current lesson material. A few candidates exchanged glances, recognizing the deliberate targeting. Breyer paused, appearing to gather her thoughts. A linear ambush is established along a single line, parallel to the target's direction of movement, she began, her explanation technically accurate but delivered with hesitation. A non-linear ambush employs multiple points of attack, often in an L shape or other configuration to prevent friendly fire and create interlocking fields of coverage. Her answer was correct, but deliberately presented with uncertainty in her tone. Blackburn's mouth tightened. Textbook regurgitation, he dismissed. In actual combat, operations, something you'll never experience, the difference is about adaptive positioning and battlefield awareness. Several male candidates snickered, the mockery spreading until the classroom door opened unexpectedly. Lieutenant Commander Everett Frost entered, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere. Unlike the other instructors who relied on volume and intimidation, Frost carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "Continue, Senior Chief," Frost said, taking a position at the back of the room. Blackburn's demeanor shifted subtly in the presence of the superior officer. "As I was saying, battlefield awareness determines survival in ambush scenarios." Throughout the remainder of the class, Frost observed with particular interest as Breyer deliberately offered answers that were accurate but understated, never demonstrating knowledge beyond what would be expected from her training level. After class, in the hallway outside the classroom, Frost approached Blackburn. "A word, Senior Chief." Their conversation, though quiet, carried unmistakable tension. "The targeting needs to stop," Frost said. "We evaluate candidates on performance, not personal preferences." "With respect, sir, I'm maintaining standards," Blackburn responded. "Some candidates don't belong in this program, despite what Washington thinks. Your job is to test them, not decide in advance who succeeds," Frost countered before walking away. Week 3 assessment day arrived with a combination of dread and determination among the remaining candidates. The attrition had continued. They were down to 72 now. The morning began with physical fitness evaluations, followed by classroom assessments. By afternoon, the class assembled in the combat training facility for hand-to-hand demonstrations. The space was utilitarian, mats covering the floor, minimal equipment, harsh lighting. Candidates formed a circle around the center mat, as instructors explained the importance of combat skills in special operations. Senior Chief Blackburn stepped to the center, scanning the group with a calculating gaze. "Winter's center mat," he announced finally. "Let's show everyone why physical standards matter." Breyer stepped forward without hesitation, though several candidates exchanged uncomfortable glances. The size difference between her and Blackburn was considerable. He outweighed her by at least 70 pounds, all of it combat-hardened muscle. "This is why we maintain standards," Blackburn addressed the group as Breyer took her position opposite him. "Some people don't belong in this program, despite what Washington thinks. In combat, your enemy doesn't care about diversity quotas." The room fell silent, the targeting now too blatant to ignore, but too authorized to challenge. Candidate Amaris Rhodes, another female in the program, watched with particular intensity, her expression suggesting this scene was all too familiar. "Hand-to-hand combat isn't about fair fights," Blackburn continued. "It's about surviving against opponents who are often bigger and stronger. Reality doesn't care about your feelings." As Breyer stood calmly waiting for instructions, something shifted in her gaze. A calculation, a decision being made. It was gone almost immediately, but in that instant, we glimpsed something beneath the struggling recruit facade as she stepped into position on the mat. Blackburn circled Breyer, explaining to the class how size and strength would always determine combat outcomes. "This is reality, not some Hollywood movie where the little guy wins," he said, using his body position to make her look smaller by comparison. He began with simple demonstrations, using Breyer to show how easily larger opponents can dominate positional advantage. She allowed herself to be maneuvered, but observant candidates noticed her breathing remained controlled, even in compromised positions. Amaris Rhodes watched with particular intensity, her brow furrowed as though trying to place something familiar about Breyer's movements. "Even with perfect technique," Blackburn continued, "physics can't be overcome. Mass and strength are determinative in combat. He increased the intensity, moving from demonstration to actual combat techniques. Defend yourself if you can, winners. Show us all why you belong here. Applying a wrist lock that should have caused immediate compliance, Blackburn appeared momentarily confused when Briar showed none of the expected pain response. When he increased pressure, her eyes met his with a flash of something that made him hesitate. Not defiance or fear, but something far more unsettling: calculation. The door opened as Lieutenant Commander Frost entered, standing at the back with arms crossed. Noticing his superior, Blackburn decided to escalate further to prove his point. "Let's see how you handle a real combat scenario," he said, drawing a training knife from his belt. The room tensed as this exceeded normal demonstration parameters. Several candidates shifted uncomfortably, recognizing this had moved beyond standard training. Briar's stance subtly shifted, a change so small most didn't notice, but Frost's expression from the back of the room showed recognition. Blackburn lunged with controlled aggression, expecting to easily overwhelm his smaller opponent. For a split second, Briar's facade slipped, muscle memory and years of training overriding her cover. What happened next occurred so quickly that most candidates weren't sure what they witnessed. In one fluid sequence, Briar redirected Blackburn's momentum, stripped the knife with a technique not taught in basic training, and locked his arm in a submission hold that left the senior chief momentarily immobilized. The move displayed a level of skill far beyond what any candidate should possess: perfect timing, economy of motion, and technical precision that spoke of thousands of repetitions. Realizing her mistake, instantly, Briar released the hold and stepped back, allowing Blackburn to regain his positioning. She immediately reverted to her hesitant demeanor, but it was too late. What had been seen could not be unseen. Stunned silence filled the room as Blackburn stared at her, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Where did you learn that?" he demanded, rubbing his wrist. "Basic self-defense course, Senior Chief." "Lucky move," Briar responded, deliberately averting her eyes as though embarrassed by the attention. But the damage was done. The candidates whispered among themselves. Something didn't add up. The technique she had used wasn't taught in any basic course. It was advanced close-quarters combat methodology reserved for specialized units. From the back of the room, Frost observed the scene with interest before quietly exiting, making notes on a tablet as he left. In the mess hall that evening, the atmosphere around Briar had shifted noticeably. Some candidates now maintained a respectful distance, eyeing her with newfound wariness. Others seemed drawn to her, reassessing their previous dismissal. Zane took his usual seat across from her, but his typical easy manner was replaced with focused curiosity. "That wasn't basic anything," he said quietly. "That was advanced CQC. Who are you really?" Before Briar could respond with another deflection, Amaris Rhodes joined them, setting her tray down deliberately. Unlike Zane's open curiosity, Amaris's expression conveyed something closer to recognition. "You're deliberately underperforming," she stated in a low voice. "I've been watching you. Your breathing patterns never change regardless of exertion level. Your gear is arranged using advanced field protocols, not what they teach us here." Briar maintained her cover with practiced ease. "You're imagining things. I got lucky today, and now I'll pay for it." Through the mess hall window, she noticed Blackburn in intense conversation with Chief Petty Officer Lazarus Wexler. Both men looked in her direction periodically, their expressions suggesting serious discussion rather than casual conversation. "They're going to push you twice as hard now," Zane warned, following her gaze. "I expect they will," Briar agreed, her voice revealing nothing of her thoughts. Later that night, when the barracks had settled into the deep silence of exhausted sleep, Briar silently rose from her bunk. Moving with practiced stealth, she navigated between rows of sleeping candidates without disturbing them. Her movements now bore no resemblance to the struggling recruit persona she maintained during daylight hours. Each step was precise and deliberate, utilizing the security pattern gaps she had memorized during her first days on base. Outside, she moved through shadows between buildings, timing her movements to avoid the predictable patrol patterns of base security. Within minutes, she reached an isolated maintenance shed near the airfield perimeter, slipping inside. Without making a sound, Lieutenant Commander Frost was waiting, his posture relaxed but alert. "Your cover is compromised, Commander," he said, without preamble. For the first time, Briar's entire demeanor transformed. She stood straighter, her eyes sharper, her voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. Blackburn suspects, but doesn't know. I need more time. Time may be something we don't have, Frost replied, producing a tablet with classified images. 2 more training protocols leaked this week. Whoever's doing this is accelerating their timeline. The photos showed surveillance images of training materials being exchanged in overseas locations, the kind of specialized tactical knowledge that could get American operators killed if in the wrong hands. Then so will I, Breyer responded, her tone leaving no room for doubt. The contrast between this assured commander and the struggling recruit she portrayed during daylight hours was striking. Wexler's been asking questions, Frost warned. He and Blackburn have history. They served together before instructor duty. If Blackburn shares his suspicions. Let me worry about that, Breyer said. What about the digital surveillance? Any patterns in the security breaches? They spent several minutes reviewing intelligence findings, their conversation revealing that Breyer's struggling recruit persona was part of a deeper counterintelligence operation investigating leaked special operations training protocols that had compromised missions overseas. We need to identify the source before they realize we're onto them, Breyer concluded. I'll accelerate my timeline, but we need to maintain operational security. As their meeting concluded, Breyer prepared to return to barracks using the same security gaps she had exploited earlier. At the door, Frost stopped her with a final thought. Commander, if your cover is blown completely, then we adapt and overcome, she finished for him. That's what we do. Breyer slipped back into the night, but as she navigated between buildings, her heightened senses detected someone watching. Maintaining her course as though unaware, she used her peripheral vision to identify Chief Wexler partially concealed in the shadows near the administrative building, his eyes tracking her movement with unmistakable suspicion. The following day brought new challenges as Blackburn escalated his targeting of Breyer. The class faced a punishing schedule of physical evolutions, each designed to push candidates to their limits. Throughout the morning, Blackburn assigned Breyer additional repetitions, heavier equipment, and shorter rest periods than her classmates. Winters, he barked during a logistics exercise. Your pack is too light. Add these, he said, tossing her 2 additional ammunition cans weighing 20 pounds each. She complied without complaint, adjusting her already heavy pack to accommodate the extra weight. Throughout the evolution, she carefully maintained the appearance of someone at their physical limit, breathing heavily, muscles shaking at appropriate intervals, sweat-soaked uniform clinging to her frame. Yet occasionally, when Blackburn's attention was elsewhere, observant candidates might have noticed how quickly her breathing normalized, or how efficiently she redistributed weight to minimize strain. During a rare water break, Amaris approached her again. You didn't engage your trapezius properly on that last carry, she said quietly. Someone with your supposed struggle would have compensated by over-engaging their upper body. Breyer eyed her carefully. You seem to know a lot about physical compensation patterns. 2 tours as a combat medic before officer training, Amaris replied. I know the difference between actual exhaustion and performance. Their conversation was interrupted by Chief Wexler calling for the next evolution. Throughout the afternoon, Wexler maintained proximity to Breyer, his observation more methodical and calculating than Blackburn's open antagonism. By evening formation, the class had been pushed to genuine exhaustion. As they stood at attention for final instructions, Blackburn announced a night navigation exercise for 0200, just 4 hours from when they would be dismissed to eat and prepare their gear. Sleep is a luxury you haven't earned, he told the weary candidates. When the formation broke, Breyer noted Chief Wexler entering the secured communications building, the 3rd time that day he had accessed the facility outside his scheduled duties. She filed the observation away, another data point in the pattern she was assembling. The night navigation exercise began under cloudy skies that obscured both moon and stars, creating near-total darkness in the training area. 4-person teams were given minimal equipment and coordinates for checkpoints they needed to locate and document. Breyer found herself teamed with Zane, Amaris, and a quiet candidate named Deacon Parrish. As they moved through the training area, Breyer deliberately allowed Zane to take point, offering suggestions only when the team genuinely struggled. At their 3rd checkpoint, while Zane and Deacon documented their arrival, Amaris confronted Breyer directly. You knew exactly where this point was before we arrived. You've been steering us with subtle suggestions while pretending to follow Zane's lead. Before Breyer could respond, a sound from nearby brush drew their attention. Chief Wexler emerged, ostensibly checking on team's progress. "Everything on track here?" he asked, his flashlight deliberately shining in Breyer's eyes to gauge her reaction to the sudden light. "Yes, Chief," Zane reported. "Just documented checkpoint 3. "Carry on then," Wexler said, moving away but not before giving Breyer one final evaluating look. When they completed the exercise at dawn, returning to base with all checkpoints successfully documented, Breyer noticed Wexler and Blackburn in conversation with a third instructor she hadn't seen before. Their body language suggested disagreement, with Wexler gesturing emphatically, while the unknown instructor shook his head. The class was given 2 hours to clean up, eat, and prepare for the day's training. As Breyer left the women's shower facility, Lieutenant Commander Frost intercepted her, falling into step beside her. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "Someone accessed the secure server last night, using Blackburn's credentials, but he was supervising the night exercise." "Wexler," Breyer confirmed. "I've been tracking his movements. He's been in the comms building at least 3 times in the last 24 hours outside his scheduled duties." "We need proof before we can move," Frost replied. "The leaked protocols are already causing problems downrange. An operation in Eastern Europe was compromised last week. We lost tactical surprise because the opposition knew our infiltration methodology." Breyer processed this, her expression revealing nothing to passersby. "I need access to the secure server logs. If Wexler is using Blackburn's credentials, there will be a pattern." "Too risky," Frost countered. "If you're caught accessing that system, your cover is completely blown." "Then we need to force his hand," Breyer decided. "Make him believe his operation is at risk so he makes a mistake." "How do you suggest we do that?" "By giving him something too valuable to ignore," she said. "And I have just the idea." The 4th week of training brought the infamous Hell Week, the defining crucible of SEAL selection, where candidates would endure 5 days of nearly continuous physical activity with minimal sleep. The class had dwindled to 63 determined candidates, each knowing that historically, nearly half would quit during the coming challenge. The morning before Hell Week began, candidates were granted brief personal time to make final preparations. Breyer used this opportunity to execute her plan, deliberately allowing Chief Wexler to observe her placing what appeared to be a small data device in her footlocker before heading to the medical screening required before the evolution. Throughout the day, she noted Wexler's increased attention, his eyes frequently returning to her position. During the final briefing before Hell Week commenced, she observed him slip away toward the barracks area, where candidates' personal items were secured. When the briefing concluded and candidates moved to the starting area for Hell Week, Breyer made eye contact with Frost, giving him an almost imperceptible nod. The trap was set. Hell Week began with its trademark brutality: surf torture, log PT, endless running, and constant harassment from instructors designed to break candidates mentally as much as physically. Through it all, Breyer maintained her careful performance, showing precisely the level of struggle expected while secretly conserving energy through techniques developed. In over years of specialized training, midway through the 2nd day, with candidates functioning on less than 2 hours of sleep, they faced the grinder obstacle course. Blackburn had escalated his targeting of Breyer, pushing beyond normal training protocols. "Winters, 4th run, carrying additional weight." "Move," he ordered, pointing to a weighted pack that was visibly heavier than regulation. She complied without comment, shouldering the excessive weight before beginning another circuit of the punishing course. Other instructors exchanged concerned glances at the obvious targeting, some recognizing that the weight exceeded safety guidelines. Candidate Zane stepped forward. "Sir, with respect, that pack exceeds the—" "Did I ask for your input, candidate?" Blackburn cut him off. "Drop and give me 50, then join the evolution at the back of the line." Halfway through her punitive run, Breyer appeared to reach her physical limit, collapsing on the course with the weighted pack pinning her down. Blackburn approached, standing over her with undisguised contempt. "This is what happens when standards get lowered for political correctness," he announced loudly enough for all to hear. As medical personnel started forward, concerned about potential injury, Blackburn waved them off. "She quits. She walks off herself." The class watched in uncomfortable silence, the targeting now too obvious to ignore. Even candidates who had previously accepted the instructor's judgment without question shifted uneasily at the clear breach of training protocols and safety standards. Just as the situation reached its breaking point, the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors cut through the tension. All eyes turned to see a Black Hawk approaching, landing unexpectedly on the nearby pad. Two naval intelligence officers in dark uniforms exited first, followed by Lieutenant Commander Frost. Their purposeful movement toward the training area immediately changed the atmosphere from training exercise to something far more official. The final passenger emerged, Captain Alara Harlow, Naval Special Warfare Command, her insignia and bearing marking her as someone far above the instructional cadre's pay grade. The instructors, recognizing the serious implications of her presence, snapped to attention as Harlow approached. Blackburn's expression shifted from contempt to concern as he saluted the approaching officers. "Captain Harlow, we're in the middle of a critical training evolution." "Senior Chief Blackburn, you're relieved," Harlow stated without preamble, her tone allowing no discussion. She turned toward Breyer, who remained on the ground beneath the weighted pack. "Commander Winters, that's enough." A stunned silence fell over the training area as Breyer smoothly rose to her feet, showing no sign of the exhaustion or strain she had displayed moments before. She stood straight, her bearing transforming completely as she removed the weighted pack and set it aside, with controlled precision. "Yes, ma'am," she responded, her voice now carrying the natural authority of a senior officer, rather than the respectful deference of a struggling candidate. The change was so dramatic that several candidates exchanged confused glances, wondering if extreme sleep deprivation was causing them to hallucinate. Breyer reached into her pocket, removing Commander's oak leaves, which she calmly affixed to her collar, replacing the ensign insignia she had worn throughout training. Captain Harlow addressed the bewildered class. "You've been part of a security operation for the past month. This is Commander Breyer Winters, Naval Intelligence Special Activities Division." The revelation sent visible shock through the assembly. Several candidates who had openly mocked or dismissed Breyer now stood frozen, processing the implications of having treated a commanding officer with such disrespect. Chief Wexler, who had been observing from nearby, suddenly turned and began walking rapidly toward the administrative buildings. His movement caught the attention of the naval intelligence officers, who moved to intercept him. After a brief but intense exchange out of earshot, Wexler was placed in handcuffs and escorted toward the waiting helicopter. Harlow continued her explanation to the stunned candidates. "For the past 6 months, classified training protocols have been leaked to foreign entities, compromising missions and putting operators at risk. Commander Winters was inserted to identify the source." Frost stepped forward to elaborate. "Chief Wexler has been selectively washing out candidates based on personal bias while fast-tracking others regardless of qualification. More seriously, he's been selling our training methods to private military contractors with foreign connections." Blackburn, still processing Breyer's true identity, stepped forward in challenge. "This is a circus show. No woman has the combat experience for SAD operations." The dismissal hung in the air for a moment before Captain Harlow responded with cold precision. "Commander Winters has led more successful direct action missions than anyone in this training cadre, Senior Chief. Her operational record remains classified at levels above your clearance." Breyer regarded Blackburn with professional detachment. "Your file says you served in Task Force Diamondback last year," she stated matter-of-factly. "Who do you think commanded that operation?" Blackburn's expression shifted as recognition dawned. Task Force Diamondback had been a highly classified multi-domain operation that had made headlines for its success without any specific personnel being identified. The implication that this woman, whom he had spent weeks denigrating, had been his commanding officer during that mission visibly shook him. Captain Harlow ordered all personnel to attention. The instructors, including a visibly shaken Blackburn, saluted Breyer formally. She returned the salute with perfect military precision, her transformation from struggling candidate to commanding officer now complete. Addressing the candidates directly, Breyer offered her first genuine assessment. "The first rule of special operations: assumptions get people killed," she said, her voice carrying easily across the silent formation. "Remember that someone's appearance tells you nothing about their capabilities or their resolve." As the formation broke and candidates were dismissed to recover from the interrupted Hell Week, Breyer conducted a brief operational debrief with Captain Harlow and the intelligence team. The electronic displays in the command center showed the extent of Wexler's operation. Manipulated selection data spanning 5 years had systematically eliminated candidates who didn't fit his personal profile, regardless of their performance. He was targeting candidates with specific backgrounds and skill sets, Breyer explained, highlighting patterns in the data. Particularly women, but also men from certain ethnic backgrounds or educational paths. And selling our methods to the highest bidders, Harlow added grimly. The intelligence photographs show him meeting with representatives from at least 3 foreign private military companies. Later, alone with Frost after the briefing, Breyer allowed herself a moment of visible fatigue, rolling her shoulders to release tension built up from weeks of deliberate underperformance. Was it harder the first time through, or this time pretending to struggle? Frost asked, referencing her previous completion of the training years earlier. The first time I had something to prove, she responded thoughtfully. This time, I just had a job to do. She massaged her shoulder, revealing a scar consistent with combat injury that she had carefully concealed throughout her time as a candidate. They never suspected you weren't just another candidate who would wash out? Frost asked. People see what they expect to see, Breyer replied simply, especially when it confirms their biases. Wexler and Blackburn saw exactly what they wanted to see, a woman struggling to meet standards. It never occurred to them that the struggle was fabricated. Before departing the base, Breyer met with the remaining female candidates, including Amaris, who had suspected her deception early on. How many others like you were there? Amaris asked directly. Not enough, Breyer answered honestly, but more than there used to be. She offered no motivational speech, no promises of institutional change, just the reality of the path ahead. The standards are the standards, she said. They should apply equally to everyone who can meet them. Nothing more, nothing less. As the candidates returned to their training, now under adjusted leadership after Blackburn's administrative reassignment, Breyer prepared for departure. Captain Harlow presented her with new orders. The unit needs you back in the field, Harlow stated. How soon can you deploy? Immediately, ma'am, Breyer responded without hesitation. My go bag is always packed. Harlow hesitated, then offered rare personal acknowledgement. What you did here matters beyond just this operation. The systemic issues you've exposed reach further than Wexler's individual actions. Breyer nodded in acknowledgement, but maintained her professional focus. The mission is what matters, Captain. I just did the job. 2 weeks later, the training facility had returned to its normal rhythm. A new class had begun the selection process, unaware of the events that had transpired. Lieutenant Commander Frost observed the candidates during surf torture, noting the changes already implemented in the training cadre's approach. Among the struggling candidates, Frost noticed a small-statured male who displayed the same controlled breathing technique Breyer had used. Catching the candidate's eye, he recognized the same calculating awareness he had seen in Breyer. Understanding dawned. Another undercover operation was already in progress, the systematic change extending beyond just catching one corrupt instructor. In his office later that day, Frost reviewed candidate files, now alert to the manipulation Wexler had been conducting. He ensured that diverse candidates who genuinely met standards would advance properly through the program, fulfilling the true purpose of selection, identifying those with the necessary capabilities regardless of appearance or background. A message appeared on his secure terminal. Observer in place. Operation Truth Tide continuing. The systemic change had begun, extending beyond just catching one corrupt instructor to addressing the broader issues of bias and security within the training program. Across the world, a surveillance photo showed Breyer, appearance altered, operating in a non-permissive environment. She moved with confidence through a crowded marketplace, invisible not through physical concealment, but by blending perfectly with her surroundings. The skills that had made her invisible as a struggling candidate now served her in the field. Her expression showed the focus of someone completely in their element, doing the work they were born to do. The mission continued, just as it always had, without recognition, without celebration, but with unwavering commitment to the standards that truly mattered. Back at Coronado, Amaris completed a difficult evolution, performing at the top of her class. The instructor, a replacement for Blackburn, acknowledged her performance with genuine assessment. Well executed, candidate. Zane, who had become a leader among the remaining candidates, ensured the training environment remained focused on standards rather than bias. The systemic changes rippled outward, one evolution and one candidate at a time. Frost stood on the beach watching candidates push through training. A naval intelligence officer approached with an update. Commander Winter's operation was successful. Target secured. Frost nodded, unsurprised. Some people do the impossible so quietly you never even know it happened. The officer departed, leaving Frost watching the struggling candidates with new awareness of what potential truly looked like. The greatest strength often came in unexpected packages, and the most extraordinary operators were frequently those who never sought recognition at all. The investigation into Wexler's activities expanded well beyond the training facility. Naval Criminal Investigative Service had traced financial transactions to offshore accounts, revealing a network that extended into multiple military installations. What had begun as one instructor's personal bias had evolved into a sophisticated operation, selling tactical information to the highest bidders. Captain Harlow assembled a task force to address the security implications, drawing on lessons learned from the Coronado operation. Commander Winter's approach proved effective, she told her staff during a classified briefing. Sometimes the best way to identify corruption is to place ourselves in positions where we're underestimated. The briefing included footage from Breyer's training, specifically the moment when she had neutralized Blackburn during the combat demonstration. The assembled officers watched with professional appreciation as she executed a series of movements that displayed mastery few achieved even after decades of training. Notice how she immediately recognized her error, Harlow pointed out, freezing the frame where Breyer had stepped back after the demonstration. Her first instinct wasn't pride or vindication, but preservation of the mission. That's what separates good operators from exceptional ones. Meanwhile, Breyer had moved on to her next assignment. The Wexler operation already filed away as another completed mission. She now carried diplomatic credentials, operating under the cover of a mid-level State Department advisor assigned to an embassy in Southeast Asia. Her appearance had been transformed, hair color changed, subtle facial prosthetics altering her features just enough that no one from Coronado would recognize her. In this role, she attended functions and meetings, observed patterns, gathered intelligence, and maintained the unassuming demeanor that allowed others to underestimate her. The skills she had perfected at Coronado, deliberately underperforming while remaining hyper-aware of her surroundings, served her equally well in diplomatic circles. During a reception at the ambassador's residence, she noted a military attaché from a traditionally hostile nation displaying unusual interest in a particular American defense contractor. Their interaction appeared casual, but Breyer's trained eye caught the subtle handoff of what appeared to be a data storage device. She didn't react, maintaining her pleasant, forgettable persona while mentally cataloging every detail. Later that evening, she transmitted her observations through secure channels, initiating another investigation that would unfold without her direct involvement. This was the nature of her work: observe, report, and move on, leaving no trace of her hand in events. Back at Coronado, the impact of her brief presence continued to reshape the training program. Senior Chief Blackburn had been reassigned to an administrative role pending review of his instructional methods. The experience had fundamentally altered his perspective, forcing him to confront biases he hadn't recognized in himself. One afternoon, he requested a meeting with Lieutenant Commander Frost. "I've been reviewing my evaluation metrics from the past 3 years," Blackburn began, placing a folder on Frost's desk. "The patterns are undeniable. I was washing out qualified candidates based on personal biases I didn't even realize I held." Frost studied the data Blackburn had compiled. "What made you dig into this?" "Commander Winters," Blackburn admitted. "If someone with her capabilities could appear so ineffectual to me, what else have I been missing? How many potential operators did I eliminate because they didn't fit my preconception of what a warrior looks like?" This reckoning extended beyond Blackburn. Other instructors began examining their own evaluation methods, recognizing that true capability often existed where they least expected to find it. The training cadre implemented new protocols designed to minimize subjective bias. Physical standards remained rigorous and uncompromising, but the evaluation of candidates focused more strictly on objective performance metrics rather than instructors' personal judgments. In the women's barracks, Amaris Rhodes had become a quiet leader among the female candidates. Having witnessed Breyer's revelation, she understood better than most that the path forward wasn't about seeking special treatment, but about performing so irrefutably well that bias became irrelevant. "They're always going to question whether we belong here," she told a struggling female candidate during a late-night gear preparation session. "The only answer that matters is your performance. Standards exist for a reason. Our job isn't to challenge them, but to meet them so consistently that gender becomes irrelevant." This philosophy, embodied by Breyer and now carried forward by Amaris, began spreading through the program. The female attrition rate, while still high, began to align more closely with that of their male counterparts, reflecting genuine performance challenges rather than biased evaluation. 6 months after Breyer's departure, Captain Harlow returned to Coronado for a formal review of the changes implemented since the Wexler investigation. She met with the training command staff in a conference room overlooking the same beach where candidates endured surf torture. "The operational security measures you've implemented are impressive," Harlow acknowledged as the briefing concluded. "But equally important is the cultural shift. Selection must identify the best candidates, regardless of what package they come in." After the meeting, she requested a private word with Frost, who had been promoted to commander following his role in the Wexler operation. "I have something for you," she said once they were alone, handing him a sealed folder with high-level classification markings. This came through channels from Commander Winters. Inside was a brief message and a small flash drive. The note read simply, "Additional names connected to Wexler's network. Operation ongoing, forward progress only." Frost secured the intelligence according to protocol, but paused before returning the folder to his safe. "Have you spoken with her directly?" Harlow shook her head. "That's not how this works. Winter's operational security is paramount, especially given the levels she's now working at." "The candidates ask about her sometimes," Frost admitted. "She's become something of a legend." "Legends can be problematic," Harlow observed. "They create expectations that reality can't match. Or they inspire people to exceed what they thought possible," Frost countered. "You should see the current class, the women especially, but many of the men too. They're pushing themselves differently now. They're less concerned with looking strong and more focused on actually being effective." Harlow considered this. That may be Commander Winter's most significant contribution, beyond the operational success. Sometimes one example is worth 1,000 policy changes. The effects extended beyond Coronado. As graduates from post-Wexler classes moved into operational teams, they brought with them a different perspective on capability and appearance. The focus on objective performance over subjective judgment gradually began to influence special operations culture more broadly. In a classified facility thousands of miles from Coronado, Breyer participated in mission planning for an operation that would target the broader network she had helped expose. Her current cover was as a logistics specialist, another role where being underestimated provided tactical advantage. Around the planning table sat operators and intelligence personnel who had no idea that the quiet woman making supply recommendations had been responsible for uncovering the network in the first place. This was how she preferred to work, her contributions measured in mission success rather than personal recognition. The path she had chosen meant that her most significant achievements would never be celebrated publicly, her name never appearing in the histories of operations she had made possible. After the planning session, her handler, a senior intelligence officer codenamed Curator, approached her as she gathered her materials. "We received word from Coronado," he said quietly. "The instructional reforms are having the desired effect. Candidate quality is up across all demographics." Breyer. He nodded, satisfied but unsurprised. "The standards work when they're applied equally." "There's something else," Curator added. "Captain Harlow has recommended you for the Distinguished Intelligence Cross for the Wexler operation." "That's unnecessary," Breyer replied immediately. "That's what I told her you'd say," Curator acknowledged with a slight smile. "She's proceeding anyway. The citation will be classified, of course, but she feels the recognition matters, even if only within the community." Breyer accepted this with professional grace, though personal recognition had never been her motivation. As long as it doesn't compromise operational security. 1 year after the Wexler operation, a small ceremony took place in a secure conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command. Only 5 people attended: Captain Harlow, now promoted to Rear Admiral, Commander Frost, Curator, a senior representative from Naval Intelligence, and Breyer herself, between cover identities and appearing as her actual self for the first time in many months. The Distinguished Intelligence Cross was presented with minimal ceremony, the citation reading only, "For exceptional performance in a counterintelligence operation critical to national security." The specifics would remain classified for decades, if not permanently. After the brief ceremony, Admiral Harlow shared an update that would never appear in any public record. The training reforms have been implemented across all special operations selection programs. Initial data shows a 12% increase in successful candidate diversity, with no reduction in operational readiness metrics. For Breyer, this statistic represented the true measure of success, far more meaningful than the medal now secured in a classified personnel file. The mission had never been about her personal vindication, or even about catching one corrupt instructor. It had been about ensuring that the nation's most elite fighting forces selected candidates based solely on their capabilities, not on preconceptions or biases. As she prepared to assume her next cover identity for a mission that would take her into even more sensitive territory, Breyer reflected briefly on the legacy of her time at Coronado. She had never sought to be a symbol or an example, yet her actions had catalyzed change more effectively than years of policy directives. The most satisfying outcome wasn't the recognition from superiors, but the knowledge that somewhere at Coronado, candidates who would have been overlooked in the past were now being given fair opportunity to prove their capabilities. Some would fail, as was appropriate in such demanding selection programs, but those who succeeded would do so based on merit, strengthening the forces they joined. This was the nature of true service, Breyer believed, not seeking the spotlight or demanding acknowledgement, but quietly ensuring that systems worked as they should. That excellence was recognized, regardless of its source. That capability rather than appearance determined who would stand in defense of their nation. Before leaving the secure facility, she shared a brief moment with Commander Frost, who had become one of the few people who knew her across multiple identities. "The new observer at Coronado is performing well," he informed her. "Another instructor was identified last month, attempting to manipulate selection metrics." "The system is working then," Breyer observed with satisfaction. "Because of what you started," Frost acknowledged. Breyer shook her head slightly. "I just did what needed doing. The changes happened because people like you and Admiral Harlow ensured they took root." This was her final truth, the philosophy that guided her through operations where she would never receive public credit, through victories that would be attributed to others, through a career defined by impact rather than acknowledgement. True strength lay not in being recognized, but in knowing the value of one's contributions regardless of whether others ever saw them. As she departed for her next mission, slipping back into the shadows from which she operated most effectively, Breyer carried with her the quiet certainty that sometimes the most powerful changes begin not with grand pronouncements, but with one person willing to be underestimated while quietly demonstrating excellence. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If stories of unrecognized heroes move you, please consider subscribing to help us share more powerful moments of quiet strength that often go untold.